Good evening and welcome to the College of Southern Nevada. We are so very, very excited, and thank you, Senator, for being here with what is the largest higher education institution in all of the state of Nevada and the most diverse. And so we are so thrilled that you can be here today to share your thoughts and to have this wonderful, wonderful dialogue. Daniel, thank you as well. Appreciate that you have decided to showcase here at the College of Southern Nevada. Want to appreciate Brenda Romero. Brenda, if you could raise your hand. Brenda is our student government president, and we are so pleased that you are here. And again, we are so thrilled that you're here to share your thoughts and ideas in front of our student population as well as our community. What many people don't know is that the College of Southern Nevada was one of the 25th, one of the schools that offers STEM programs to Hispanic students. And so we're the 25th of all the colleges in the United States. So we want to thank you and turn it over, and we're looking forward to a wonderful evening.
Thank you. Oh.
Good evening. How's everyone doing? My name is Juan Martinez. I'm the field director, the Las Vegas field director here for the LIBRE Initiative. We have a booth outside. I'd like to welcome everyone after the event to come out, check us out, try to get involved anyway. Something you may not know about me, I'm actually a Coyote alumni. So go Coyotes, I graduated from this school.
All right.
I'd like to introduce one of the great leaders in the Hispanic community. He worked his way from the fields all the way up to the White House. He's the executive director for the LIBRE Initiative, Daniel Garza.
To be sure, I was a staffer at the White House. Yeah, thank you so much for being here. I'm just thrilled that we have a packed room, and I think it really sort of speaks to the desire that Latinos have to hear directly from national leaders who are so influential in making policy and in driving policy that really impacts us every day. As we know, Latinos are disproportionately impacted in a lot of social indicators, and so it's critical that we have a dialogue and drive a discussion about how we can strengthen the American economy and strengthen our security at the borders as well. There's a lot of disquietedness now, probably more than ever, about the insecurity around the world as well. And so I'm just thrilled that Senator Rand Paul could be with us today so we can have this kind of dialogue. U.S. Senator Rand Paul is one of the nation's leading advocates for liberty. Elected to the United States Senate in 2010, Dr. Paul has proven to be an outspoken advocate for constitutional liberties and fiscal responsibility. We have observed that as he has worked tirelessly to advance policies that limit government overreach. Dr. Paul currently serves on the Committee on Foreign Relations, Committee on Health, Education, Labor and Pension, Committee on Homeland Security and Government Affairs, and Committee on Small Businesses and Entrepreneurship. That's a lot of responsibilities. I had the privilege to serve on a school choice panel in Milwaukee.
Thank you, Daniel. It's great to be here. We've been all over the place. We've been all over Nevada, and I was kind of busy last night with that debate and trying to talk some sense into those people. How many people here can speak more than one language? Pretty good. Now, you'll see me tonight because I'm going to try out some of my second language, but it's not really so much a second language. It's just a very little bit. I should be better, but I took many years of Spanish, but it didn't take so well. But I'm going to try to give you some of my best lines that I've been able to come with, so bear with me. If you don't speak Spanish, you're going to have to ask your neighbor to help you with some of this. But buenas noches. Por favor, disculpen mi español. Como crecí en Houston, es un poco de Tex-Mex y un poco de Spanglish.
Muy bien.
I lived, worked, and played alongside Latinos in Houston, Texas. As a teenager, I worked with immigrants, mowing lawns and putting in landscaping, and worked in these different businesses really in the hot Texas sun for years. I remember once asking one of the immigrants I was working alongside how much he was making. ¿Cuánto le pagan por el trabajo? He responded, $3. And I responded, $3 per hora? And he said, no, $3 por día. And the point that struck home to me was that they were out there working in the hot sun, but they were not looking for a handout. They weren't looking for something free. They came here to work. And I think it's a good point, because some people have often said, they say, you see anybody wish I'd paid more attention in class. As a teenager, I was not always a model citizen, such as I am today. In middle school Spanish class, my exuberance sometimes overcame my restraint, and I was asked to go to the principal's office. I discovered, though, that my Spanish teacher was married to the assistant Spanish teacher, the assistant principal, and that they were getting a divorce. And so when I got sent to the principal's office, often I would just go to the assistant principal's office. And that way I would avoid corporal punishment, which we had back in those days. But I remember what my Spanish teacher used to always say. It's a phrase that's always stuck with me because I was a bit of a talker, and she would say, "En boca cerrada no entran moscas."
That's right.
But her being married to the assistant principal and them getting a divorce served as my ability to try to escape my punishment. Sometimes I was able to do that. I would make the decision on my own not to go to the principal's office and to show up in her soon-to-be divorced husband's office. And he would commiserate with me and say, "Oh yeah, she's crazy. Just sit for a while and then go back and we'll pretend like I punished you." But as a consequence, I never became as proficient with my Spanish as I would have liked. A great deal of the time, unfortunately, instead of learning, was spent in detention. When I was in college, I read Miguel de Unamuno in college, and I was fascinated by his writing, and I think he actually gives Republicans some good advice. He wrote, "Miramos más que somos padres de nuestro porvenir que no hijos de nuestro pasado," which translates into English as, we should try to be the parents of our future rather than the offspring of our past. What does that mean? Create our future. We shouldn't be locked into our past. And I think sometimes Republicans were locked into our past of not doing so great with Latino voters, but I think a lot of it's we're not trying. I think Republicans need to become parents of a new future with Latino voters, or we'll need to resign ourselves to permanent minority status. The Republican Party has insisted for years that we stand for freedom and family values. I'm most proud of my party when we stand for both. I stand for the rule of law and a secure border. I stand for a wall around the welfare state to ensure immigrants come to work. But I also stand with those who want to see more legal immigration once we have secured our border and fix our broken welfare system. My great-grandparents came from Germany, so I'm an immigrant just a couple of generations removed. They didn't speak much English when they came. They peddled vegetables. They weren't rich. Didn't go to college for a couple of generations, but we ultimately did. All they wanted was opportunity. I think both sides of the equation in the immigration debate need to get back that attitude, that seeking and offering opportunity, rewarding those who follow the rules and who work hard. For the American dream to be achievable for all, though, we have to make some changes in this country. Our education, our tax system, our reliance on government, and our deepening debt. I'd like to talk about some of these today. My goal, my mission is to enable you in Nevada and all over the country to have an educational system that believes that all students have the capability to succeed. When my ancestors came here, people said the same thing about new immigrants today. Oh, they can't learn. They came here to pick crops. They don't have the ability to learn. But it's not true. Frankly, in a generation or two, people do, and new geniuses are found in every generation. Unfortunately today, though, the federal government and the education establishment seems to casually disregard Latinos, blacks, and others who don't seem to have the best schools to go to. I argue that the problem is that the government forgot what I learned when I became a doctor. First, do no harm. We need to get the federal government out of the way now before it's too late for our kids. No one in Washington knows whether or not your kids have a good teacher. They don't know what textbooks you should use. And they damn sure don't know what every test that kids should take and how many times they should take tests. We should take education out of Washington and return it to the people, return it to the states. That's why I say we ought to get our platform back to the platform that Reagan ran on, which said let's eliminate the Federal Department of Education and bring education back to the states and the people. But then let's innovate. Let's find and reward the best ideas and best teachers. I think we ought to connect all of our students to the best teachers in the country. I see no reason why, if there's a great teacher in Boston, we're not connected to them, or in Houston, or all around the country. I love the story of Jaime Escalante. Anybody remember the movie Stand and Deliver? He taught in East LA, and in 1982, in an environment that really didn't think Latinos could learn. Even his fellow Latino teachers didn't have a high regard for the kids. They said, these are the kids of migrants, they'll never learn. But he became the new math teacher at Garfield High School, and he determined to change that, and he believed that every student had possibilities. So he wanted to challenge the students to a higher level of achievement. He wasn't at first liked. Many of the students pushed back, and they said he was too hard. But after numerous taunts and threats, he said, I'm going to teach these kids. Every kid can learn. And as the year progressed, he was able to win over the attention of the students by implementing innovative teaching techniques that believed in the kids, that any kid can learn. And he transformed these sometimes troublesome teens into dedicated students. While Escalante was teaching basic math and algebra, he thought his kids could learn more. So he decided to teach them calculus. Nobody thought he could do it. Nobody thought the students could learn. He held summer courses in pre-cal. But despite the concerns of other teachers who felt like, and this is a quote from the teachers, you can't teach logarithms to illiterates, they were disdainful. But Escalante nevertheless developed a program in which all the students eventually took the AP exam, and the vast majority of them passed the test. People didn't even believe it. They made them retake the test, and they passed again. It was an amazing victory because of one really special, incredible teacher who didn't give up on kids. His students were amazed. This was an amazing feat. The school system was amazed. We need more of that. We need more Jaime Escalantes that have high hopes for everybody. My dream is that we transform the education monopoly into a thriving, competitive environment where all students, Latino students, black students, poor students, white students, get to choose what school they attend, and that no student is forgotten or ignored. I also want to transform everyone's prospect of getting a job after they finish school. The single biggest obstacle, there shouldn't be a surprise, is the government. In most cases, the government gets in the way of education, gets in the way of earning, it gets in the way of you actually having some take-home pay. We have a 76,000-page tax code. I think we ought to get rid of the whole thing. Start over. Let's do it where you have a tax return you can fill out on one postcard. Let's have a single rate for everyone. To try to show people what I would do with it visually so people could get an idea of getting rid of how big the tax code is, I put it in a wood chipper. I set it on fire. I took a chainsaw to it. And then just the day before, the day of the debates, I was trying to relieve a little stress, so I shot it with a shotgun, I shot it with an AR-15, I shot it with a 9mm pistol, and I got to keep thinking of what, excuse me, ways I can get rid of it. But what I like to do is get rid of the whole thing, file it on one card. What would that mean? If you're a worker or an owner, it would mean a much simpler tax code. It would mean more money left in the hands of the people, and then ultimately we'd have, you have any water?
Yeah.
That's what happens when you give 6 speeches in one day. But anyway, we'd have a flat tax, and this would be a tax that would be one rate. The rate would be 14.5%. Some people might argue, well, that's just going to help rich people. No, I want it to help everybody. Right now, businesses are leaving our country. So the owner leaves, but so do the jobs. We're chasing American jobs out of our country. If we were to do my tax cut, it'd be a $3 trillion tax cut. What does that mean? $3 trillion left in the economy. Just in Las Vegas, it would probably be hundreds of millions of dollars that wouldn't have to go to Washington, that would stay here. My tax cut also does something that no other tax cut does. We'd get rid of the payroll tax. The payroll would be paid by the businesses, but it wouldn't be paid by the individual. So an individual that makes $40,000 a year would have $2,000 more in their paycheck. I think this would be a tax cut that everybody could like, rich and poor, but it would leave more money in the economy. It would also get rid of the special loopholes, the corporate welfare, and all the special interests that lobbyists get out of the tax code. We'd get rid of all of that. All the special interest loopholes would be gone. There'd be nobody left in America that would pay no taxes, no businesses avoiding all the taxes, and no wealthy people avoiding all of their taxes. From Las Vegas to Detroit, from Reno to Appalachia, that's what I've been trying to do, is spread this message. It's a message of hope, an optimistic future that includes everyone. I think it's a mistake to demonize groups of people, to score cheap political points. It disgusts me, and it should disgust every American. Making the decisions about who will lead the country shouldn't be about a cheap reality TV show. This is serious, and we should treat it in that way. My plan is for anyone who loves freedom and opportunity, no matter where you came from or what you look like, that you'll be included in that dream. My plan calls for us to be boldly for what we are for, in fact, more boldly for what we are for. But we also need to be bigger and broader in our outreach. In Love in the Time of Cholera, Marquez gives some advice that Republicans might consider. Human beings are not born once and for all the day their mothers give birth to them. Life obliges them over and over again to give birth to themselves. This is my advice for the Republican Party. Let's seek that new birth every day for ourselves, for our party, for our country. Let's not let the misplaced ideas of the past set us on an unsustainable path to the future. And as we seek it, let's seek it with passion and strength. Let's seek it, as the painter Robert Henry says, like a man coming over the hill singing. I like that. I like the way it sounds. Let's seek it with a passion, the passion of a culture that gave us Pablo Neruda. I love how Neruda in Si Tu me olvidas issues a passionate threat, but ends by saying, pero si cada día, cada hora, sientes que a mí estás destinada, con dulzura implacable, si cada día sube una flor a tus labios a buscarme. Ay, amor mío, ay mía, en mí todo ese fuego, no repite, en mí nada se apaga, se olvida. How can we not embrace such passion? How can we not want that culture to merge with and infuse the American spirit? They're not called the Romance languages for nothing. I stand before you today ready to be a leader for a bold conservative reform in education, taxes, the size of our government, but I also stand before you willing to lead all of America, not just part of America. I'm on a mission to take back our government and for each and every one of us who love liberty. And I ask you to join me today, and thank you for coming out.
And Mr. Smith has the Pizza Hut, and he's been in business 10 years. He's proved himself. The community votes every day that he has good food, and they go to this Pizza Hut. So that is a business that you know already exists. So how would we create jobs? We can either try to create a new Pizza Hut by sending the money to Washington and asking it to come back, or we could try to have lower taxes for the Pizza Hut that exists. What I would do is I would have lower taxes for the businesses that are in existence to hire more people, and I think it would work. I would also lower the payroll tax. In my tax plan, we get rid of the payroll tax. And I think this would help the working class. So often with tax proposals, they try to pit the working class versus the rich. I want everybody to have a tax cut. And guess what? If you pay more in taxes and we cut everybody's taxes 10%, your tax cut will be bigger. That's just math. And we have to kind of get over that and not say, oh, that's terrible that a rich person's getting a big tax cut. You want everybody to get a tax cut because the money remains in the community. The argument against the flat tax has been, primarily by Democrats, has been that if you have a flat tax, poor people won't get any tax cut. And so that's why when I designed mine to get rid of the payroll tax also. If you make less than $50,000 a year, you don't pay much in income tax. most of your taxes are payroll taxes. So I think if you want to help the working class and really get them going, getting rid of the payroll tax would be an enormous stimulus. It'd be about $2,000 for someone making $40,000 a year. I think that's the best way to get our working class going. Plus, the tax rates would be low enough that instead of companies like Burger King reincorporated in Canada, probably 24 companies went to Europe last year. Instead of companies leaving, maybe the companies would be beating down our door wanting to bring jobs here again.
Well, we talk about small businesses also and how important and critical they are to the Latino community. In fact, there are reports that indicate that Latinos are opening up businesses at twice the national rate. So this is a critical area for us. Obamacare came along, and it was sold as lollipops and rainbows, but it turns out that there are a lot of salt and vinegar with it as well. People are getting laid off part-time. There's a lot of regulation to it. There's more control from the bureaucracies. The shift of costs from the consumer, from the insurers to the consumer has hurt people, especially with the high deductibles, high premiums that there was never cost savings. What do you tell folks as far as, maybe you can't repeal all of it, but what do we do to address that situation that is impacting negatively Latino businesses?
This is the eternal debate we have in our society about government. We have politicians that say, "Hi, I'm Santa Claus, and I'm going to give you free education. I'm going to give you free health care. And while I'm at it, free cell phones, free cars. Just have it all for free." But we kind of all know deep inside nothing's free. You got to get it from somewhere. The interesting thing about it is they take it away from the opportunity of the people who actually they're trying to help. So poor and those trying to get a job, they say, "Oh, we're going to help you by giving you health care." And it sounds good. But then once the health care is guaranteed above a certain amount of hours of work, guess what? If you were working 32 hours a week, you now may be working 28 hours a week and you still don't have health insurance and you have fewer hours. The other thing that's not seen, and there was an economist writer from the 19th century, and he talked about the seen and the unseen. So for example, if I say, well, let's double the minimum wage, let's make it $15 an hour. You can see that. Gosh, that looks great. I've got a check that's worth $15 an hour. What you don't see is all the people now who don't get a job. And the statistics don't lie. When we've looked at this year after year after year, we've found that guess what? The people hurt the worst are the people trying to get their first job. Teenagers, teenage kids. All my sons have worked minimum wage jobs, and we're proud of them. Now, we don't want them to have that job when they're 40, but it is a stepping stone, and it's a way to get in the marketplace. And if you make that above the market rate, what you do is you cost jobs. That's the entry wage for kids a lot of times.
That's exactly right, and I understand that a lot of the businesses who actually suffer under the minimum wage, maybe even close in minority communities, the ones that don't get the jobs are minority kids, and so I can see that. A recent study by the Pew Research Center reported that the number of young adults moving out and heading their own households, often considered part of the American dream, is no higher in 2015 than it was before the recession began in 2007. What is the approach that policymakers should take to promote private sector job growth, allowing young people to climb the economic ladder, specifically young people?
Well, this should scare every parent who has a 26-year-old into thinking about public policy, so your 26-year-old will move out and get their own place. But it is true that you see these stories all the time. 26-year-old kids are living at home. 30-year-old kids are living at home. And so we have to figure out a way to get them out and independent. And it means that you need millions of jobs created. You have to have millions and millions of jobs created. Number one, we have to be competitive with the rest of the world. Our business tax, our corporate income tax is 35%. In Canada, it's 15%. But when this gets polarized between Republicans and the Democrats often say, "Oh, we're not going to cut the taxes for rich corporations." And it's like, well, have you ever worked for a poor corporation? If our corporations are not competitive tax-wise, they'll go somewhere else, and so will your job. So we have to understand at one gut level that if you raise taxes for people that are wealthier than you, it will help you. And I don't do it to help rich people. Rich people have plenty of money. The reason I want to cut the taxes for rich people is to help poor people. I mean that sincerely, because many rich people have plenty of money, but if you take more money from them and you give it to government and you inflate the bureaucracy, then you have less and less jobs. I mean, it hurts the very people you think you're helping by trying to redistribute the wealth. When in reality, what we want, and I think what most people immigrated and came for, is the American dream. The American dream is that the least among us had the same opportunity. It's not always as easy, but I guarantee in every generation of new people who come to this country, and sometimes it takes a couple of generations, they succeed. And that's what we ought to be about. Not anything that's guaranteed, not anything that's given to you, but opportunity.
Reports continue to underscore the concerns with the Social Security program, which acknowledge the need for reform. After its 5th consecutive year running on cash flow deficit, looking out into the audience, the room is filled with young individuals. So tell us the truth. Are we all simply out of luck when it comes to Social Security for them and future generations?
Yes.
What do we do about it?
Unless we do something. I mean, there is time to wake up and do something, but if you're a young person, don't plan on it. Don't plan on Social Security being there because we spend more than comes in. We used to have 16 workers for one retiree. Now it's 3 workers for one retiree, and we're living a lot longer. But it can be fixed. But you have to do things that aren't that pleasant. And people are like, why do you want to do this? Do you hate old people? It's like, no. I want to fix it so it will still be there for the next generation. What you have to do is gradually raise the age of eligibility. For people my age and on down, they always have to, and we did it once before. In 1983, we raised the age of Social Security from 65 to 67. We didn't do it abruptly. We did it 2 or 3 months a year. And it probably has to go to 70, to tell you the truth. But it could be over 30 years. And so nobody's now retired. It wouldn't affect them at all. The other thing you probably have to do to fix Social Security, raising the age fixes 2/3 of the deficit. Social Security is $6 trillion short. So raising the age gradually fixes 2/3 of the deficit. The remaining third, I would do something which also pleases no one, is I would probably means test the benefits. I've done pretty well in my life, and I would just get less. I'd get a couple $100 less. But you'd keep everybody at the bottom and sort of the middle somewhat the same on their Social Security benefits, but the people at the very top, would just get a little bit less. And I think we could all live with that, and that would help to fix the remaining third of the shortfall for Social Security.
So, despite what, if you watch Spanish language television, you may not know this, but all issues are Latino issues. Latinos care about all issues. Still, immigration is an important issue for us. It impacts us sometimes personally. How do you reconcile, or how do you approach the question of border security and immigration reform that allows the private sector to respond to market forces and meet labor demand?
So you saved the easy question for last.
As a follow-up too.
Yeah. To my mind, particularly, and I'm speaking as a Republican from the Republican Party's point of view, so much of what we need to do to engage the Latino population is attitude. And that's kind of what I wanted to express in my speech. There weren't a lot of details about immigration reform, but it is about attitude and appreciating that Latinos, like every other ethnic group that came here, are part of this melting pot, and they bring something good, the Romance languages and all, a lot of things that are good for mixing into the melting pot and being part of, this new culture. So I think attitude is important because, to tell you the truth, there are thousands of details on immigration. We're not going to agree on every one of them. I do think that you can't have open borders. So I just don't think it can be wide open. My fear is that if, you mentioned Pew did a survey of like 70 countries, and they said if people could come, anybody that wanted to come, like 700 million people would come. And so there have to be some rules. Sure. And I think most people here obeyed rules to come to this country. So I think there have to be some rules. I think if you put rules in place, and we say from now on we're going to have rules in place, there's less of a hostility towards those who are here. There's supposedly 11 million people who came here not by the rules. I think if we were to fix the problem and just say we're not going to admit 11 million more people without the rules, that there will be rules in place, that goes a long way towards sort of fixing the problem, and people then saying, well, we can figure out what to do with the 11 million who are here. In some ways, I've thought about it this way, and I'm sure I'll get in trouble for saying this, but there could be the aspect of internal immigration for the 11 million who are here. But it has to be after securing the border. And the reason why, and not everybody will agree with me on this, but that if you grant anything that gives people status without securing the border first, the fear among a lot of people is 11 million more people come because you're not being honest. And see, in 1986, we did this. We traded legal status for 3 million people for a promise to secure the border, but apparently it didn't happen because 11 million more people came. So I think you have to secure the border. If there were no things that the taxpayer is providing, like health care and education, you could say anybody wants to work, and you kind of can say that, but there's a lot of stuff that the government provides, so I think there have to be some rules. But I think you're right that we have to meet the market demand. So there are some people, and I absolutely disagree with them, and say, oh, well, let's cut off all immigration. That's crazy. In fact, if you cut off all immigration, you'll have more illegal immigration. The way to fix illegal immigration is to have more immigration, more legal immigration. But we also need a better work program. I live in Kentucky, and I talked to a farmer friend of mine the other day, and he has about 30 workers who all come up here from Mexico. And he's had it for, his dad have done it for 30 years. And I said, well, do you have to advertise for someone who's born here? And he says, yes. And we've been doing it every year according to the rules, and we've never had one American, native-born American apply. So there are a lot of jobs that would go unfilled, and we have to let the numbers on the visa need to be proportional to the demand. It'll change every year, but if there is a demand for construction workers and there's not enough construction workers, you should increase the amount of visas coming in for work.
So is it arbitrary?
I don't like arbitrary
Increase?
caps. It would be based somewhat on the market force, and it's a little complicated. You have to have some statistics and measurements to know what that is. I think it's estimated that 300,000 to 400,000 people come in to pick crops every year. One of my problems with the Senate bill on immigration, and one of the reasons I voted against it, frankly, was it limited it to 100,000. And it's like, if you don't want illegal immigration, you've got to have enough worker visas to accommodate what the marketplace demands. And so you can't set it too low. And so if a lot of people are estimating 300,000 to 400,000, plus you have to figure out what the number is. And that means document, figure out, count all the people coming into work. But if 400,000 people come into work and you change it to 100,000 next year, you're going to cause more illegal immigration because there'll still be the demand and the need for the workers.
Great. So the last question before we get to the audience questions is, recently some high-profile policymakers have made statements that would alter our current interpretation of the 14th Amendment, namely birthright citizenship. What is your position around that issue? And I understand it's sort of nuanced.
If you have an open border, I do have a problem with granting citizenship to those who come illegally. If you have controlled border, then you wouldn't have the problem at all because people would be coming legally. We decided, we had several court cases around 1900, that if you were here with a green card, if you had come here legally, your kids were citizens automatically. There is some dispute over whether or not if you come illegally, your kids should be. The courts have been interpreting it so far that you are. But what I would say is, to me, that the problem is a pressing problem because you have a huge open border. If your border was controlled and most people were coming in legally, most of these problems go away. Like what to do with the undocumented. There won't be any more undocumented if we have a
Do you have an
border that
interception rate in mind?
You know, I don't.
As a criteria for securing.
Yeah, I don't know of enough of the 97%, 95. I don't know what the exact numbers are and all of that. I'm convinced if we had the will, we could do it. But you have to secure the border before you figure out what to do with the other problems. Because if you say, okay, it's fine, we're going to give status to 11 million, but we're not going to fix and have a secure border. The worry is then 11 million more people come, and could we eventually be inundated with people? So I call myself an immigration moderate. I think you got to figure out an answer in between. I'm not one of those who says load them up and ship people home. I think that's crazy. Yeah, I think that's crazy, and it could never be done consistent with American ideals of freedom to load 11 million people up somehow and deport them.
Well, we would welcome somebody who could achieve consensus and show leadership in that area. So I understand there's some questions from the audience that we would like to ask. In order. David Sheehan writes, Senator Paul, what is your definition of the two words equal and fair, and how do the two words differ?
You know, fair is obviously very subjective. Fair is different, depends on the eyes of the beholder. If I make $50 an hour and you make $25 an hour, you might say, well, that's unfair. Would it be equal to have us each make $25 an hour? The problem is if you take your conception of fairness and you want to say everybody's going to get something equal, what you do is you take away the freedom of the marketplace to figure out prices. And if you do that, any kind of controls that come in and try to enforce equality end up stifling the marketplace. In the Soviet Union, they've tried to do that. They've tried it under communism. They've tried it under socialism to make everybody equal. But what ends up happening is everybody's equally poor.
favor them, and small businesses usually lose. How would you support small business growth with all the financial influence coming up from large corporations and lobbies?
Now, I think that's a good question. And people talk a lot about how big corporations have too much influence in Washington, and I agree. One thing you could do, and it's difficult to figure out what is constitutional on campaign finance reform, but the one that I think would pass constitutional muster is that if you're a big corporation and you do business with government and you get a $1 billion contract, well, you don't have a right to a $1 billion government contract. Maybe we could place restrictions in the business contract that say, okay, you're agreeing to do business with the government, but one of the restrictions is you're not allowed to lobby at all. You know, because what happens is they say, oh, you can't use any of that money to lobby, but you know how money kind of goes in one pocket and another in different places, and for accounting, there's no way to stop a contractor from using that money to lobby. And I guarantee that's the first thing they do is they hire an ex-congressman, pay him $1 million a year to lobby for more money.
Julio Hernandez says, what is your solution to lowering educational costs? Is it reimbursable?
I don't have my reading glasses.
Sorry.
I think I can get the gist of it. If you're talking about reducing for education, reducing the cost, one way you can, and I think this is something that's going to happen in our lifetime, and I'm not sure exactly when it happens, but it'll be the biggest advance in education in our lifetime. What's going to happen is the price per pupil of education is going to go almost to zero. And you're going to be connected to the best teachers in the entire world. Because imagine this, you live in Madagascar, but you have internet access but no calculus teacher. You're going to learn from a calculus teacher in Boston. Same way between Boston and Las Vegas. And you're going to have extraordinary teachers. Think about it. There are tens of thousands of teachers, but it's like NFL football. I probably wouldn't make the NFL. So there's all kinds of gradation, and the very best play NFL football, why wouldn't we have that in teaching? The very best explainer of calculus or physics, maybe there's 50 of them, maybe there's 100 of them. Why wouldn't we all learn from that? And you would still have local teachers. I'm not talking about eliminating teachers, but we would connect people. But you're also going to find the geniuses that don't have access to education. But then access is going to be, one professor might have 1 million students. So then the price per student goes way down, and education should become less expensive. We haven't quite gotten that, and if you're in college, you'll agree. Online courses cost, even though the expense for the college is a lot less, it costs about the same amount. Really, what should happen through online courses is the price per pupil should go way down, and college should be more accessible. But college has a lot of government involvement. Accreditation has a lot of government involvement. I'm sure I'm making a few professors uneasy here. But the thing is you don't get any real competition. It's the same thing that happens in medicine as well. Government's too involved, and you don't have a real marketplace.
Terrific. Last question. What is Tanner Drum says, what is your response, and what can be done about Janet Yellen's statement today that inflation is too low?
When someone says inflation's too low, that means they say we need to take away more value from your dollar at a faster rate. That's what inflation is. If you want to blame somebody for a lot of things going on, it's the Federal Reserve, because they steal the value of your dollar, and it's very, very slowly done. And guess who gets hurt by that? Like anything else, rich people can absorb anything. It's poor working class people. When your food goes up or your gas goes up or any other prices goes up, means the value of your dollar goes down. It's the working class that bear the burden of devaluing the dollar. The reason they devalue the dollar is not because they're evil, although that might be debatable. It's because they're paying for the massive debt. You borrow $1 million a minute, you have an $18 trillion debt. How do they pay for that? They have to artificially keep the interest rates low, or government won't be able to even compensate, and they have to print up money. And as they print up money, they devalue the currency, but it's the working class who suffer the rise in prices. Thanks.
A round of applause for Senator Paul.
Last night on TV, and I want to compliment you. Keep this as part of your, repertoire about the non-violent criminals and dope and so on and so forth, and how you spoke up for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
That
Thank you. We want to be respectful of the senator's time, so I'm sorry, we have to move on. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Are we going to do
Let me just say really quick,
the interviews? All right.
if you could fill out your surveys that you have so we can make an assessment of the event. Thank you so much. Oh, that was good. Thank you, Senator. Yeah, great. I know I ran a little bit.